that's part of running. It's hitting those highs and lows and kind of sticking through it. In the beginning, I think I said show up, blow up, but what my motto really is, and this doesn't just equate to running to me, it's to everything. Show up, blow up, because there's always going to be some kind of blow up. It's life, but then show back up.
Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. Through personal and professional connections in the running world, I have the privilege of getting to know some amazing athletes. I've always been fascinated by the psychological aspect of running, and this podcast is aimed at exploring this and much more. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Gooder. Gooder has the slickest shades around for only $25 and $35. They don't slip or bounce, and they stay on my face way better than more expensive sunglasses do. If you'd like to support me and the show, treat yourself to a pair or two or three of Gooders and head over to gooder.com and get 15% off your entire order with the code FTLR. That's 15% off at gooder.com, code FTLR. Your face will thank you. Have you guys heard of Beam? I have been absolutely loving their products lately. Beam is a CBD company that's making waves in the running world by offering products that combine THC-free CBD with other high-quality ingredients. It was founded by two ex-professional athletes with the idea that everyone should have the chance to experience what better feels like. Whether you're sore or stressed, Beam is key for recovery and self-care. Try it for yourself with 15% off using the code FTLR from beamtlc.com. I recommend Beam Dream Powder or the Focus Capsules. Welcome back. I have Kelly Young joining me on the podcast today. Kelly, thanks so much for taking some time to chat.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here.
We're doing it. We're finally doing it.
We're doing it. We're neighbors. We're friends. We've chatted about it, but here we are on your couch.
It's a lovely couch, isn't it?
It's amazing. Yeah.
So buying a couch in 2021 is fun. I learned yesterday that the fabric is incredibly limited because of the freeze that happened in Texas. So all of the soybean crops froze. So they can't produce the product, like the materials that create couches. And then the foam was impacted by the same weather stuff. And a factory burned down that supplies all of the furniture in the country. Fun fact.
Fun fact. Who would have thought? That's sad. I hope that they get all of their supplies back. But I have a solution. Are you talking about a new couch for your new house?
Yeah, eventually.
Could probably just go get some wood and
just build it.
DIY.
Yeah, DIY couch. Well, you're just gonna sit on the wood.
Yeah, make it more challenging, I guess.
Brings a new meaning to.
No, we like comfort around here.
We do like
Comfort's
comfort.
Good, yeah.
So who is Kelly?
Well,
switching gears entirely from couches to Kelly.
Yes, I think. Definitely most known for my 3-peat free throw shooting champion title.
What
in
year was
grade
this?
School. Oh, 2005.
The glory days.
Yes. Grew up in Philly,
Yeah.
which is where that happened. Pretty big goofball. I think I'll go a little bit deeper since you and I both know that our accomplishments, even though that was a great one, and I think I could still take you.
Anyone. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Our accomplishments or lack of accomplishments, right, definitely are not tied to who we are as people.
Have you always felt that?
Oh, I don't think so, actually. It's been a 20s something. I just turned 30. I think probably mid-20. That narrative went to rest, which was nice. Never fun to feel that way. I feel like as runners or athletes, it's probably a common thought. Anyway, I'm also a dog mom, 15-month-old GSP, Joey. You know her well.
Joey has eaten my burrito on occasion.
She's a wild one. Proud member of the LGBTQ plus community. I think I'm just navigating life over here. I think I'm a dreamer and pretty hopeful most of the time. So just keep showing up.
And we can just wrap
Do
there.
you ask everybody that question?
I do. And
do you have a favorite response?
I don't.
Okay.
The reason that I started asking this question, I've shared this before on the podcast, is because I was doing intros for other people. And I got to a point where I was putting it off and I was delaying the releasing podcasts because I didn't want to record intros. I like talking. I don't like any of the like management or details or like production component. Shout out to Brian Walters of Single Track Sound for taking care of it now.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. You make my life so much better. Anyway, I didn't enjoy the post-production. And so I figured I'd just start asking people who they were at the beginning of the podcast. And I was expecting people to answer like, hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a runner and I work at noon and I have a dog. And just like really surface level stuff. And most people like get to that, but they don't lead with that. And for the most part, and I don't think there's anything wrong if you do, but it just opens up the conversation in a way that I think people are not expecting. And I usually talk about exactly what they introduce themselves as.
I like that. I mean, we spend the most times with ourselves, so we should, get to know ourselves a little bit more and share that with others.
For sure. So given that it's a running podcast, we'll start there.
We could do that.
So Kelly and I have spent a lot of time running together. We met at Western States in 2018 over a Frisbee and some tacos. Shout out to Maeve Sloan.
Yum.
Thank you, Taco Fairy. And we've just done a bunch of adventures together. Kelly and I ran rim to rim to rim. We ran rim to rim together. Shared some laughs and bad jokes.
Yeah.
But I'm curious.
Suffering.
There wasn't a lot of suffering on the out. But anyway, do you remember your first run? I've been rambling. This is your time to ramble.
Oh no, I love this. You can ramble all you want. My first run, I grew up playing sports. So mostly team sports, ball sports, basketball, soccer, softball. So I was running around a lot. My dad actually owns or runs a rec center back in Philly. So it was kind of like our second home. But it wasn't until high school that, just kidding, I ran track in 8th grade.
Plot twist.
Yeah, oops. But in high school, I had cousins. I come from a big family and I have 35 cousins. And
oh my God.
A lot. And one family, we call them the Kelly girls, actually. Their last name is Kelly. There's no one named Kelly, but they're all magnificent runners. And I went to high school and looked up to them and was like, I want to be kind of like them. And so I joined cross country. So I would say that's kind of when it started.
And where did the ultra running come into play?
I think I moved to LA after undergrad and started hiking a lot in the mountains. So my go-to trail of choice is definitely rugged mountain terrain. And there are actually many of those in Southern California, which I'm not sure if you've done any, but we'll have to make that our next adventure. Cactus to clouds to cactus, maybe. But anyway. So,
Backbone.
Yes. Mount Baldy. He knows it. I think the long hikes then exposed me to the running community. I passed one of my best friends, my roommate, literally on one of those mountains. She was on a run. I was on a hike, and I didn't know that ultra running was a thing, I guess. And once I did, I started it right up.
And that was 2015, 2016?
That was 2017.
And so first ultra, what did that look like?
That was 2018. That was after I met you. Western States, actually, I want to chat about that really quickly because I feel like you and I are similar in that we've never run it. Do you want to run it?
Yeah.
Okay. We both want to run it. It's not my dream, but I want to run it one day. But I feel like you and I both make a big effort to go if we can every year. The community there, the environment, seeing all of the athletes, whether at the front of the pack or the back of the pack, is so special to me. And that is kind of where it all started for me. I went there by myself just to see what it was all about. And I was signed up for my first ultra, which was Tahoe Rim Trail 55K, like a month later. And I cried before I finished that one. But
Out of pain or happiness?
It was pain for sure. Many of my friends who know me, probably you included, know that I love to show up and kind of blow up at races. I go out a little too fast, the Kelly special. So there was no difference in my first ultra. I must have thought it was like a 5K or something.
You just missed one of the fives in the...
Yeah. So, but it was beautiful. And then I ran 100K about 2 months later.
So 2 months after your first ultra, you ran 100K. Mm-hmm. And did you win it?
I did.
What was that like?
It was pretty surreal. This is not a knock on me by any means, but it was a smaller field.
I hate when people say that. You did it faster than anybody else that was there. People are like, oh, I ran a local 5K and won. But it's just a local, you still won.
Yeah. You know what actually that reminds me of? I was wondering how many Ted Lasso quotes we were going to throw out tonight, but you beating on yourself sounds a lot like, what is it? Woody Allen playing the clarinet. And I really don't want to hear that.
Wait, what?
Ted says in one of the episodes, you beating on yourself, not giving yourself the credit you deserve, sounds a lot like Woody Allen
I don't want to hear
playing the clarinet. Yeah. So anyway, yes, I did win. And it was actually a Solomon Running Academy event. And so the first place, male and female, got to go to Hong Kong for a week.
Oh, right. I remember this because I was like, oh, yeah, I just met Kelly and she's a new ultra runner. Now she's in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Like a sponsored trip.
Yeah, it was, I definitely entered and then was like in it very quickly.
What was that like?
It was so much fun and like so amazing to have that opportunity. I definitely felt a little bit overwhelmed when we were there. It was so funny because they're like, hey, we sign you up for a 50K sky running race at the end of the week, which I was like, cool, that sounds awesome, but also kind of scary. I'm going to be with like these amazing runners, Max King, Courtney, and a couple other like Solomon elites were leading the camp. It was really awesome. They brought about 20 of us together, all from different countries for the week. Anyway, so during the week, they're like, okay, let's run like 30 miles every day and then race on Sunday. I was like, what happened to tapering?
Well, you couldn't taper if you were a new ultra runner.
I couldn't. I mean, I was just kind of like, this is so amazing. And I do feel a little maybe like I shouldn't be here, but also like, whatever, I'm just going to be here. I'm here. I'm not going to go. And I did it. And it was awesome.
You didn't win that one, right?
I did not win that one. No.
Is that a Sufferfest?
That was hard. It was very hard. There were many stairs in Hong Kong, like so many. Yeah, I was definitely traumatized from stairs for a bit.
So you win the race, you go to Hong Kong, you come back. This is 2018, end of 2018?
Yep.
What's the world looking like for Kelly at this point?
You want the truth?
Yeah.
I had moved home to Philly for about 7 months during this time. I just needed like a reset. I feel like I was kind of all over the place. I had moved to LA and San Diego and lived there for about 8 years. I put my stuff in storage in San Diego and moved home to Philly, not for good, but just like, okay, let me just kind of like the first question, like, who am I? You know, I'm like 25. Just needed to do like I just needed stillness. And that's not something I've had much in my life. I try to practice it a lot, but very much always on the go, very much always looking for the next thing. And so during that time, actually, I was in Philly kind of looking for that. And so when I got back from Hong Kong, I was still there. And then, I don't know, everything just happened really quickly. I ended up joining Team Sunto, which was a multi-sport elite team for like 2 years that has folded since COVID. But I joined that and I was like, cool, I'm going to road trip back to California and go to camp along the way. And so I think I got what I needed out of my stillness, but then I kind of jumped right back into things.
Is the busyness by design, do you think? I'll tell you why I ask after you answer the question.
I think so. Why do you ask?
So 2018 and 2019 also was a period of lots of busyness for me, travel wise. And I had a conversation with with my therapist and my friend Tansy, who I've had on the podcast. She's not my therapist. And we were talking about like this need to always be busy. And I was trying to escape from like not being happy in Boston. And I was like, if I'm always on the go, I've always got something to look forward to. And I think I took 30 something flights that year. And yeah, that was the year that we met. This was 2018 and into 2019. And so for me, the busyness was like a way to not deal with what I needed to deal with. Mm-hmm. So I'm just, anytime someone tells me that they're very busy and they don't know why, or like something like this, I'm always curious if it's something similar.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. I think I definitely relate. And I think as runners, it's funny because it's like, I don't want to say we're all running from something. Like, I don't think any of us need to stop running because we're essentially running for something, from something. But I had this conversation with my therapist a few weeks ago. She's like, you by no means need to stop running, but you need to figure out like
why.
Yeah, like, and
she said you need to go on to this podcast with this guy John that I've heard. He loves to explore the why.
Yeah. Oh,
it's called For the Long Run.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what she said. So here we are a couple weeks later.
Well, I'll have to send her my bill because that's it's a perfect pipeline of sending people from therapy to my podcast.
Oh man, maybe we should think about a new title for your podcast that has something to do with that.
What would you call it?
I don't know. Something about Jonathan's couch. I guess you don't do all of these.
But then they would all have to be on the couch.
It's not a bad idea.
The levitation station.
Oh, you've thought of this.
No, so when I was coming up with the name for the podcast, my roommate, John, not me, came up with he wrote like a bunch of names on like a whiteboard in our apartment in Boston. And that was one of them. It was like a really funny list. None of them were relevant to running, but just like making puns out of things.
Yeah.
We were great roommates.
Sounds it. But I think that's an important question. I don't want to deflect it. I think
on the John.
That's a Philly reference.
Really?
The John.
The toilet.
No. Okay. Well, yeah, that. But also everything in Philly is like a John, Jawn. So you're my John, my friend.
Got it.
This cup is a John. Like, yo, can you pass me that John? It's kind of weird.
That's weird.
Yeah.
All the Boston people are going to tune out at this point.
Sorry about that. Anyway, what I've realized as I try my best to get still and reflect on that, I'm trying to switch it from running away from pain or grief or discomfort and more so running with it. It's obviously a great outlet. So it doesn't necessarily have to be from something. It could just be, but we can still run towards hope at the same time. So that's kind of been my focus. It's like, I don't need to run away from it, but I can certainly keep it with me until it serves its purpose and I don't have it anymore.
I love that. You've done some really hard races. One of them I had the privilege of joining.
Was it a privilege?
I don't know. No. Yes, it was. And I'll tell you why it was. So I talked with Anthony, I don't know what, we need that sushi stat.
Me too.
Talked with Anthony Lee about his experience at Ouray. He won the race. Mm-hmm. And what I said to him was, every time I saw you, which was probably 5 or 6 times, you were smiling. He ran for 36 hours. He was smiling the whole time. I don't know if that was just when he was seeing people or that's how he just was, but he said that that's how he was. Anyway, we had a very different experience. And you had apologized to me at one point for being so slow as we were descending. Not the descent where you dropped me, the descent where I was pulling you down the mountain because I didn't want to get struck by lightning up there.
I didn't want you to either.
Meanwhile, this race is so ridiculous. We're going to back up here. This race is so ridiculous that Kelly had a conversation with the crew and pacers beforehand and said, we all have different tolerances for extreme weather. And I won't be mad at any of you if you decide you're not comfortable with being out there. And I was like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? Because I don't like running in the dark. I don't like lightning, and I don't like cliffs. And there was the opportunity to have all three of those at the same time with hail too. So anyway, we're descending this stupid descent where we climb 4,000 feet in 4 miles.
Yep.
And you apologized for moving slowly. And I said, stop apologizing. I literally started a podcast to explore like what happens in this moment. And so I started running with Kelly. I've talked about this on the podcast, but here you are. Anyway, I started running with Kelly at her mile 55 and we ran till about 60, almost 67. And in that, I think I saw her hit her limit. I saw you hit your limit and then keep going. And like when I say hit a limit, I mean exactly what I said to you on the course, which is this would have broken most people. And it may be tempting to you, but you've somehow figured out how to continue and how to like push through when there was nothing left mentally or physically. You just figured out how to keep going. So I want to know, like, on that way down, when you couldn't answer anything, what you wanted, what your name was, where you were, like, what kept you moving?
God, those are some good memories. I can't wait to do it again next year. I hope you'll join me. No, seriously, John was absolutely amazing. And I was what I thought a pretty mean human not mean, but I was just like, okay, can we just
shut up? So on
Mr. Positive over there.
On the climb up, we had the goldfish moment.
We did.
Where I was feeding Kelly goo blocks or
yeah, the chews.
Goo chews.
Yeah.
And every time I handed her one, I would say one, because you were a goldfish.
I was. Yeah. And everything's in the past. You know, we only have the next moment ahead of us. And I think that goes back to your question. I have a few places that I feel like I go in those moments, or a few like tools in my tool belt, if you will. I might have been beyond capable of reaching those at that point, though. You're right. That was probably the lowest I've ever felt in a run or an adventure.
Like to paint a picture here for those who didn't have the pleasure of a firsthand experience. If you run 100 miles, you probably know what she's talking about. But if you haven't, picture a marathon and you know that it's going to be finished in a couple of hours and you're low patch, like you can push through. And I've said before, I think anybody can run a marathon, and I don't think that anyone can run 100 miles. Kelly was so beyond like her own self that I presented the idea that we're about to come into the aid station. What sounds good? Like, it's going to be overwhelming. What would you like to eat? She couldn't even tell me what she wanted to eat. She couldn't respond.
I don't remember that.
I'd never seen a human in this condition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I had to keep going, to be fair. Otherwise, I would have just been on that mountain.
I think forever. I said that to you quite a few times.
It was kind of, I think, looking back and reflecting, left, right. Even if it wasn't conscious, it's something that we all know and do when we lace up like every day, every other day, however often you run. We're still putting one foot in front of the other. And I think that's what it came down to in that moment. And that's what got me down that stupid mountainside. And even though I wouldn't admit it in the moment, it was beautiful. Just being able to show up to that start line and start that race meant so much to me. And I think in that moment, again, even if it's not conscious, because you're right, I was hallucinating and not talking. Those are all still in my heart and in the back of my head. So I think all of my reasons on why I wanted to do that race, one more Ted Lasso quote and then I'll stop. But what is it? If part of the challenge is like riding a horse, you know, if it's not hard and you're not uncomfortable, then you're doing it wrong. So I was just out there riding my horse that day and riding all the waves of what, you know, 100-mile race with 43,000 feet of gain and descent is going to give you and throw at you. I think I was prepared, but also unprepared, if that makes sense. You don't know until you're out there.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a challenge for me.
Yeah, but I signed up and I trained for it.
Right.
And it was my goal, my dream. I do think I'm drawn to kind of everybody. I mean, not to say a marathon isn't a big challenge, like by any means. I think that's amazing. 5K, whatever distance. But for me, there's just something about those crazy mountain, hard ultras. The longer, the better, usually.
Yeah, I think a 10 mile, I would have been satisfied with the Ure 10.
It's such a cool race. It's such a cool environment. I'm glad you got to experience some of it with me.
So it was really cool. We had sunrise over the town of Ure when we fartlicked up the hill.
We did. Yeah. Should I tell them?
Sure.
I show up to the aid station. I guess I was really struggling. I mean, I was vomiting. I also have this toe thing. It's called a Morton's neuroma, and it really just irks everything and is super painful. And so I was struggling. And so I left my crew at around 1 a.m. And they sent me out in the middle of the night to go climb like a 13,000 foot mountain.
Kelly had just taken a 30-minute nap and then had a cup of coffee.
Yeah, after I spilled one all over me. So they, understandably so, kind of miscalculated the time I was going to be at the aid station. So I get there at like 6 a.m., right?
Yep.
5 hours later, and they're not there. And it's just a pacing only. So they can only really drop John. It's not like I had a crew. So I ended up kind of just chilling. I was like, I'm fine sitting here waiting. So I waited for a bit and then they show up, but I was like, okay, I'm going to take off. And so John chased me up the trail for about a mile.
There's a mile sprints at 8,000 feet.
Things can change so quickly. And I think you saw that. I was feeling reasonably well for what I had already done, 60 or 55 miles and like 20,000 feet of gain. But within 5 miles, I'm at my low point. And I think that's part of running. It's hitting those highs and lows and kind of sticking through it. In the beginning, I think I said show up, blow up. But what my motto really is, and this doesn't just equate to running to me, it's to everything. Show up, blow up, because there's always going to be some kind of blow up. It's life, but then show back up. So I think that's a big part of it. Do you like that one?
I like that one. Yeah. What would you tell yourself now at mile, whatever it was when we started that climb?
Oh, I think I would force you to repeat the goldfish motto about 20 more times. I don't think I was sane enough to really drill that in, because that is such an important piece of those kind of events. It's like stay in the moment and only remember the current moment, practice mindfulness, presence. I honestly would tell myself, I think I was in a point where I was having some negative self-talk. I am strong. I am enough. No matter what happens, if I drop, if I finish. I don't think I was checked into that, the enoughness of really just being, but showing up that day.
Thanks again to Gooder for supporting this episode. I have a few different styles of shades. At $25 a pop, you can leave a pair in your car so that you'll never be without some shades. You can feel good about your purchase too, as 1% of Gooder's annual gross sales, not profits, go directly to environmental nonprofits working towards making our world a better place. If you'd like to support me in the show, treat yourself to a pair of Gooders and head over to gooder.com and get 15% off your entire order. That's 15% off at goodr.com with the code FTLR. Your face will thank you. Thanks again to Beam for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Did you know that you can get a subscription to Beam's Dream Powder? It's what I use most nights before bed to help with a refreshing night's sleep. When you subscribe, you'll get the Dream Blend with a bunch of perks like even better pricing, free shipping, a free mug, and a drink frother just for signing up. Dream helps me wind down at night, and it's made with compounds like melatonin and magnesium that support a better night's sleep. Make sure to use the code FTLR at checkout for an extra 15% off the already discounted 20% off monthly rate. And now back to our conversation. The piece that I find really interesting is the power of, like, I joke about Ted Lasso, but like the teachings of the TED. The goldfish thing is so powerful. Like, I don't know that I would have finished Boston without that mentality. And it got to a point where I was like, wow, I've made some mistakes in this race. And that didn't matter. Like, you had to just focus on the here and the now and the what are you doing right now. You can usually course correct. You can sometimes course correct. You can't always course correct. But the mind is the most important part of that. Like, do you want to course correct and do you want to turn this around? And that leads to my question around dropping, because you stopped at 66 and you really didn't want to. So I think that there's a glorification of suffering and like persevering. And then there's like stuff that's like not actually the right decision. I think there are a lot of ultra runners that listen to this podcast in addition to road runners. And even for road runners, like starting a race that maybe you shouldn't be racing. Sometimes it's harder to not do something than to just persist or to do it. Do you remember that part first?
I do remember it. So are you curious about kind of what was going through my head?
Yeah.
Leading up and then after?
Yeah. Because we haven't really talked about that.
We haven't, which is interesting. I think I agree with the glorification piece, and not that that's the way I think it should be, but I think it happens quite often. I will say I've been hearing more and more conversations about how natural and normal and honestly important it is to have DNFs. I think it teaches us a lot, and kind of steering away from pain as weakness leaving the body, and just being smart and listening to ourselves and knowing, again, like coming back to what I said in the beginning, is that like even though I wanted that finish so badly, that finish does not define me. First of all, I can always go back if I decide to. If I don't decide to, then that's fine as well. I actually never truly struggled with not dropping out of a race because I was afraid of what people would think. I feel like I've done a decent job at checking in and DNFing. I think that was my third over like 4 years. I think DNF'd 100K and then actually another 100 miles, which our good friend Alex went on to win Orcas 2019. I think my relationship with DNFs is healthy, but in that moment, you're right. Like, I was sad. I cried. I didn't want it to happen. But it's just part of life. Looking back, I think it was the right call. I mean, you saw me. My friend Rebecca chatted with me and was like, I actually am worried for you. And I don't want to worry my friends. When I said that in the beginning to my crew about, hey guys, like, I just want you to know I'll respect whatever you decide. I did have it in my own head that I would kind of continue on no matter what, unless, of course, like, they're pulling people and it's extremely scary, but like past the suffering, because of course it's going to get hard. I truly didn't have anything left in me, I feel. So I'm happy with the call. You know, I then went on to run Cascade, and I think Rebecca brought that up in the van when I was deciding if I was going to drop or not. And I was kind of like, I don't want to think about that right now. But then, of course, immediately I get home, or I get to the hotel after I decided to drop, and I'm showered and I'm like, oh, I'm going to do that Cascade 100 in like a month. Honestly, that helped a lot. But overall, it was the right call, and it doesn't matter to me. I'll probably be back to try again, but that's not because I need to claim my enoughness by any means.
I love that. And then we went on to have a fun weekend in Buena Vista and
we did
Breckenridge. But I think the way that you like made sure you were having fun the next few days was important. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but talk to me about that.
I think it's part of my personality, maybe not intentional, just kind of natural. That just reminded me when I did drop from Orcas. So it's a 100-mile race on an island in Washington State. So you have to take a ferry to get there. and I had dropped at like 1 a.m. And so I had two good friends who have absolutely know nothing about ultra running, but they were there as well. And so they wanted to spend the next day drinking cider and sightseeing. And I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. And so after I dropped, I remember like posting stories and just having like such a magical, fun day with good friends and people being like, I love this like attitude. Like you showed up, you tried. And then that's me showing back up for myself. I don't think there's anything wrong with being disappointed or upset. And don't get me wrong, I am upset about not finishing Ure, but I don't know. I just think life's too short. And I think I'm a pretty positive person at the end of the day.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, you are as well. I think that's why we get along very well, because it's like we're feelers and we acknowledge the hard stuff, but we seek out happy stuff as well, which is so important.
Like the sushi that's waiting outside of the door.
It's here.
It's here. We'll keep going a little bit longer here, but so talk to me about the show up, blow up, keep showing up is fascinating. I think another way to put that is just, as you said, like riding the waves. Like I think life would be boring without the waves. And I think that these lows and these like challenges make the successes that much more enjoyable, which is very cliche. And I'm sure everybody listening is like, yeah, dude, you've said this on the podcast like 15 times.
Yeah. Why are we riding waves though? What about, I can't surf. So what if we ride?
Well, it's like failing up versus riding a wave. So Jake Tuber, who I had on the podcast, is a organizational psychologist and has a background in brain stuff. There you go, Jake. 10 years of education. It's all brain stuff.
Yikes.
And he talked about this concept of a corkscrew, and you're on this corkscrew that's up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. But in an ideal scenario, the end point is higher than the start point. So you may have some bumps along the road, but along the way, the circles get bigger and you go higher and higher.
Yeah, I love that. And it reminds me of something me and my sister were talking about. Actually, it's like what you feel or what other people see is like a never ending circle. But what is really happening is it's like a 3D. If you look at it from the side, it is like a never ending circle, but it's growing and getting longer.
I like that.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah,
similar
same
thing. A question I like to ask on the podcast frequently is, if you were to fast forward 5 years, what are you really proud of? So you're now 35.
Okay. Am I making up stuff that happens between now and 35?
I'm not sure there's an alternative way to address this question.
So, I mean, what am I...
Unless you got a crystal ball and you know what happened.
No, I don't. I'm just
In
confused.
which case I have many more follow-up questions.
That'd be pretty sweet. Not gonna lie. It would take a little bit of the fun out of life. But I mean, can I speak to kind of what I'm proud of today?
Yeah.
Just because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I can say I know for a fact I'm big on, we all know life is so uncertain and honestly groundless. It just is a fact of life. I think we can seek things that ground us, but we're really all just out here floating. But I know that I will continue to lean into and embrace that uncertainty, even when it gets hard. And so kind of surviving. And that's one thing I'm absolutely proud of. I'm going into my 30s with I'm a huge quote person. And one in particular is kind of like my, at least the first couple years motto is, doesn't have to be perfect, only truthful. And so coming back to finding, and they're ever changing, but truths, will be super proud if I can continue to do that. And I'm proud of the truths that I've kind of followed and found the past 30 years. Yeah, I hope to continue to be a good friend. And if I am, I'll be proud of that. Yeah. What about you?
What if this is a podcast about Kelly?
I'm curious.
What?
What's your answer to that question?
What was the question? Sorry, I wasn't listening. I'm kidding. What am I proud of for that's 5 years away? This is such a hard question to answer, and that's why I like asking it. But because it's like you can talk about like family, you can talk about running, you can talk about life, work, where you are. So I'm not going to address any of that, and I'm going to answer it in a way that is a bit more like esoteric. And it's like if I look back, I don't know, 5 years previously, I just want to be proud of what I've done. I was listening to Humble and Kind yesterday, song first released by Tim McGraw, but originally written by Lori McKenna.
I love her.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
She is so amazing.
So I didn't know that she wrote the song, but I was listening to her version of it. So for those who don't know, it's a country song, so it's like very storytelly, and it was written to her husband and her family basically with the goal of like showing how appreciative and grateful she is with the life that she has and gets to live. And she talks about family and love and grandparents and like all these things that actually matter versus like how fast can you run, a 50K or marathon or 100 miles. And I listened to the song. It was on Sirius XM, and then I found it on Spotify, and I listened to it 4 times in a row, including twice while sitting in my garage yesterday.
I love that.
And I was like, oh my fucking God, this song, I've never felt closer to like the message of something than this. I bought a house yesterday. I'm in a new relationship. I'm like having the time of my life at work. Podcast is great. Like family stuff is, up and down with health of grandparents, but like I get to show up for my family and friends and this and that. And like, I feel like, I forget what the line is, but it's like, and when you get to the place that you're going or turn back around and help someone else get there. I'm butchering the things. I'll put it in the show notes. Or Ruby will put it in the show notes. Shout out to Ruby because she's amazing.
Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you, Ruby. But I had this like immense like moment of clarity, gratitude, whatever, that like everything that I've wanted for the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, maybe not 20 years, is like happening in this moment right now. And so fast forward 5 years, like I just want this moment to continue.
Yeah.
And I want to ride that roller coaster up and up and up and up and up. And I said to my therapist, I was like, my biggest fear right now is this roller coaster peaking, because I feel like I've never been this high, and I've never had so many people like around me that matter and that I care about, and family and friends and like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I just want this feeling forever. And so fast forward 5 years, like I want more of that.
Wow, I'm going to cry. That was beautiful. One thing I will say is I'm so glad that you're embracing this feeling and everything that you've kind of accomplished and made happen, because it's pretty rad. I mean, what episode of this?
It'll be like 185.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I know how much you love your grandparents and your girl and all your friends. Anyway, one thing I did want to say though is that I feel like fear is so valid and universal. But what made me like kind of hopeful is when you said, I want to keep riding the roller coaster. Well, like the current place that we're all on the roller coaster right this moment had like its own ups and downs to get us here. So it's like kind of just it's gonna keep happening. Right? Like not to be negative.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, like, it has to, right?
It will.
Yeah.
And so even if you come down and stuff happens, like you're still on the ride by showing up. And I think that's pretty cool.
Totally.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for listening and being you. I know family is big for you as well. I guess it has to be with 35 cousins. Can we talk about Tim?
We can talk about Tim.
So I'm curious how running played into your grief initially and still. So Tim, your brother, passed away, and I want to I'm curious about the relationship between grief and running there, if I may.
Of course. Tim, I miss him a lot. And actually today is the 18th. So today's a hard day because the 18th is when he passed 10 months ago. And so it's always, grief is not linear. I'm learning. And so like the 18th is always kind of like extra hard, but then there'll be other days too that, things happen. Hasn't been easy. It was pretty sudden. It was very sudden. He was a year older than me, so 31, just taken way too soon. With running, it's not that we were connected to running when he was alive. We played sports together growing up. I mean, part of my kind of love for sports, I guess, was trying to keep up with him and my older brothers. But running's such a big part of my life now. And so when he passed away, I mean, yeah, I was running, probably 60 miles a week. And I speak a lot to the uncertainty of life and groundlessness. But this was like, I don't know. I was so far off the ground. Like it hit me super hard. And I really thought that running was going to be a huge coping mechanism for me.
You took a bunch of time off, right?
I did. I didn't have any energy. I felt sad. And so I took almost 6-7 weeks off, didn't run at all, which I think it was important for kind of my journey. It's hard to say if it was super helpful in like mental space, because then you get into kind of a different mindset, maybe a worse one because something you had for it was just, it's hard to say, but I think it's what I needed at the time. And so I honestly just stopped, but I knew I would revisit it. And when I was ready to revisit it, I was in San Diego and I thought, okay, this is the week and I'm going to dedicate this week to Tim. I called him T-Dog. And so one thing as I'm kind of on this growth journey, and I always want to kind of try to show up as the best version of myself, is I wanted to check in and make sure that I wasn't running away like I'm so used to. Like I graduated college and ran away to the West Coast because I was in the closet and didn't want to come out. And then I ran away from, family stuff through actual running for a long time. And that's not me showing up as the best version. I think we need to show ourselves grace, but it's just not what I want. And so that was really important to me. And so I started coming up with this kind of mantra, like running with grief. It wasn't going anywhere, but like I said, I didn't need to be running away from it. And so I tried to get back on and I ran on my favorite local trails and, I would run up hills and cry and it was emotional. And then I moved to Bend shortly after, actually. And I remember being on a local run and scattering some of his ashes, just a few. He's just with me when I'm running now. And then I kind of started running quite often again, regularly, back to 60-mile weeks. And all along, he's kind of been here on the journey. I think when I think about gratitude and why I'm running, part of it, of course, is because I love it. But part of it is to empower myself to keep going. And so when I'm feeling those moments of sadness and grief, it's just left, right. And then sometimes I'm stoked and out there running on the top of a mountain, having all of these, like this summer was so much fun. And I saw so many different places and finally got to connect again after COVID with so many friends that I haven't seen in so long. There are definitely happy moments, and it seems kind of silly, or I don't know if it's silly or to put a label on it, but like, I do kind of feel like he's out there with me because it's what I love to do. And he's like truly in my heart. I think a lot about us as kids. That's when we were like truly were really connected. And we went through, the same childhood for the most part. And so that is where I kind of hold it. And running involves so much heart. And so because he's such a big piece of that, it's kind of just a constant. Yeah, I think running towards hope and not necessarily away from the pain.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I definitely resonate with, or definitely feel a lot of that with my grandfather, and obviously a very different relationship, but the feeling of like having someone with you, or so, like doing things that you know they're proud of and they can see it happening somehow, some way. You can just feel it. And
yeah, it's kind of magic.
Yeah.
Sometimes sad magic, but sometimes beautiful magic.
Yeah. I'm always reminded of something one of my mentors said, which is, how cool is it to have had such a powerful, such a deep relationship with somebody that it physically hurts when they're not there. And it sure beats the alternative.
Yeah, I like that. Your mentor's a wise person.
He sure is. He's a family guy, and he knows a lot of good stuff. Well, Kelly, we're going to have to do this again, because there are so many things I wanted to ask about that we didn't even get to. Maybe we'll have to schedule ourselves a fun time in the mountains, have a off the record conversation, or another on the record conversation. But
I'm sure we'll have plenty off the record.
I'm sure we will. And some of them shouldn't be recorded. Anyways, thank you so much for being you, for showing up for yourself, and for this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And
Talk soon.
Now the fun stuff.
Sushi.
All right, thanks. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next time on For the Long Run, and in the meantime, happy trails. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too. This podcast and the accompanying music has been produced by Brian Walters of Single Track Sound. For the Long Run's logo was created by Vanessa Wolf of Sterling Wolf.